Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Zero Hour. You know, it's amazing the kinds of things you find when you look through the headlines. I know I do that at the top of the hour for our broadcast show, but here are a couple other stories that just caught my eye over the week. The Dalai Lama says he's a Marxist. Did you know that? At a lecture in Kolkata, which used to be called Calcutta, he spoke about the growing divide between rich and poor and said, quote, "We must have a human approach. As far as socio-economic theory, I am Marxist." This is the Dalai Lama talking. He said, in capitalist countries, there is an increasing gap between the rich and poor. In Marxism, there is emphasis on equal distribution. Many Marxist leaders are now capitalist in their thinking. So that's the Dalai Lama. Now, Pope Francis has denied being a Marxist or a communist. Rather, says the Pope, he follows Christian doctrine. And that sounds about right. Here's what the Pope says. The Pope says, quote, "Land, roof, and work." It's odd, but for some, if I talk about these, they'll say the Pope is a communist. I'm paraphrasing slightly. The Pope also said the fact that the love for the poor is in the center of the gospel is misunderstood. Those values for which you are fighting are sacred rights. It's the church's social doctrine. That is Pope Francis speaking. Now, from the sublime to the less so, from the sacred to the otherwise, we learn that J.P. Morgan Chase, by some measurements, America's largest bank, run by Jamie Dimon, who was once called the president's most favored banker, has been accused of ripping off churches. Last August, the Christ Church Cathedral in Indianapolis filed a lawsuit in federal court, and we learned this by way of Wall Street on Parade. That lawsuit alleges that its endowment funds, which were meant to feed and shelter the homeless and to help homeless families and children, along with keeping their food banks stocked and so on, ended up as a wealth transfer scheme to J.P. Morgan. The complaint alleges that J.P. Morgan engaged in, quote, self-dealing, made fraudulent misrepresentations, omitted material facts about their widespread, quote, widespread and profound conflicts of interest, and created, quote, toxic investment products, which resulted in, quote, the surreptitious transfer of wealth from the Christ Church trusts to J.P. Morgan Chase. Now, out of 177 different investment products which J.P. Morgan purchased on behalf of the Christ Church Fund, the percentage of its own proprietary products that it purchased ranged from, quote, 68% to a staggering 85% of the portfolio. Now, in a perhaps not entirely unconnected story, CEO Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan Chase complained that banks were, quote unquote, under assault, a whined that banks were being unfairly treated by regulators, and that sometimes his mega bank had as many as 5 or 6 different regulators looking at it. Well, you know, he hasn't considered the fact that if you are accused, A, of ripping off churches, people probably don't think very highly of you. B, if you are deeply involved in the Bernie Madoff scandal, people may not think very highly of you. If you have committed so many fraudulent acts, your organization, of course, that you have to pay $20 billion in fines in 1 year, it may be that you haven't earned the trust of these regulators. Now, what else can we tell you? The middle class. Now, here's a story that will seem random to you. We learned from the Nashville Tennessean that the musical middle class in Nashville has collapsed, just like the rest of the middle class. But this is songwriters, this is pickers, this is people who do session work, this is producers. The entire middle class of the music industry has been decimated. The super wealthy, the Taylor Swifts, remain extremely wealthy, but those people who just do it for a living and get by, songwriters and so on, they just can't make it anymore. You know, it's just, somebody ought to write a song about that. And we will end with this. The president, who has been changing his tone somewhat, good news and bad news, he is said to seek a 7% budget boost, according to Bloomberg. So he is not trying to cut the budget to please Congress. That part is good. Now, I am unhappy about this part. The new spending request that the president is reportedly going to send will include $34 billion each for national security and domestic spending, adding up to a budget of almost $4 trillion. We need that spending at home. We do not need more national security spending. At least that is our opinion, and that is the one we're sticking with. I am RJ Eskow, and this is the Zero Hour.